Welcome to Commander Central. Today we're going to be talking about threat assessment in EDH by popular request. We mentioned it last week and multiple people on Twitter said, absolutely, do a show on threat assessment. So here we are. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
So, gentlemen, what's happening?
It's been a week.
It was snowing this morning.
It was. I got a text from my wife that was just, it's snowing out, followed by a string of words I can't say on the air. She's a first grade teacher, so that's why you have to be really making your first grade teacher mad if she's swearing in class over text. So yeah, that wasn't a happy sight to see. I wasn't ready for that, I don't think. In mid-October.
I am.
You ready for it?
I love winter.
This has been a miserable fall, so I guess might as well snow if it's just going to be rainy and 50.
It's not like we had a summer neither, so who cares?
Yeah.
Let's just get winter over with and start again next year.
And then no one played EDH this week. Really, Max played a game or two over the weekend, but that was really it.
Yep.
We all had work things and family things and various things, so we didn't play much. I did just finally put together a deck, or at least order the last parts I needed for a Saskia Exalted deck. So hopefully I will have that by next week's show. I can at least report back how version 1.0 went. I will say this, in playtesting, I think we made a comment on the show about dual lands before and how like having a dual land in your deck doesn't make that much of a difference. I stand by that in a 2-color deck. Having a Tundra in my Sphinx deck doesn't make any difference at all. Having 6 dual lands in a 4-color deck absolutely makes a difference. Like
It does.
My mana base, I was like, oh, this is probably going to be really sketchy because
It's 4 colors.
It's 4 colors, and with the duels and fetches, that makes that plus shocks, and that makes that so much easier to hit those colors.
It does.
So I will amend our previous comment by saying if you're playing 4 or 5 colors, it's a nice luxury to have for sure.
Luxury. Is the key word.
Yes.
Because I know with my 5-color combo slivers, I didn't run any of my duels in there. I ran
Shocks.
half of the shocks,
Okay.
but I ran all the fetches.
Yeah. Right.
Which I have for being a modern player.
Yep.
Otherwise, it was all basics other than that.
Oh, nice. So yeah, you can get away with that pretty easily.
It's all about how you build the deck. Like
Yeah.
I built it with land ramp built into it and card draw. So I'm going to hit the colors I need. And then you heavy on your color that's your main color. So you're guaranteed to have it most of the time.
And my main color wound up being white, of all things. I'm playing, it's an exalted.
Exalted.
And so many of the white creatures that are exalted are white. So I have more white than anything else, which I was also kind of shocked to see. But between the exalted creatures and like Swords of Plowshares and Path, a lot of removal spells are white too. So it just wound up like it skews heavily white. But I will report back how Exalted works with a Saskia deck after I give it a try next week. So how many changes have you made to your Regna and Krav deck so far?
1?
So you're pretty much running still on version 1.0.
Yeah. 2. I took out Zulaport Cutthroat
Really?
and put in a Bitter Blossom because I didn't have a Bitter Blossom at the time.
Sure.
And now I got one from Dana. I'm on loan.
Right.
And then I took out a land because I was running 37 and was getting perpetually flooded every time I played the game with it, and put in a Blind Obedience.
Oh, interesting.
So another just lockdown
Which is
to
always good.
help get the life gain to trigger, Regna, or it helps get Krav through.
He's actually playing Blind Obedience in a deck that the rules text
It actually
follows.
works, right. It actually matches up. Does that bother you guys at all, like with having that in like a mono white deck or something? It's legal.
Not at
No,
all.
it doesn't bother me. Like I actually had a talk with a couple people at the store last night who were building decks, and they were talking about Rat Colony, and they're like, I can play as many as I want. And I'm like, yes, in cards like that state you can play as many as you want. That text trumps the rules of the game.
No, that one doesn't bother me, but for some reason like the extort mechanic does, and so do off-colored fetches. I don't care if somebody else does it, but like in my own deck it bugs me for some reason.
I'm starting to come around on the fetches. I used to be a
But there's
purist.
no-
Used to.
It
Just
makes
as
no
planes
sense.
are
You're
mountain.
correct.
Right.
It makes no sense for me to get hung up on it. And actually, in my Mina and Den deck, I started slowly adding them because it's landfall triggers. So there's fine. But yeah, it's always one of those things that's kind of bugged me. But that's just probably in my head. Just like Torment of Hailfire is entirely me being a weirdo. Because that was the general consensus I got back was just kill people and win the game and start a new one. So that's apparently just me being a weirdo as well.
the more games you can play in a night, the less time you spend dirtling because someone doesn't play a card like Torment to Hellfire.
You are correct.
Aren't scumbags like myself and playing Blood
Exactly.
Bond.
That's what I need to do in that deck. Is just start running Blood Bond combo.
You
Done.
used to have,
Max,
you
convinced
used to
me.
have piece
You
one of
convinced
it
me.
in that
I did.
deck.
I did once upon a time. So we have no MVP cards this week because we didn't play enough games to really get into it. Chris mentioned this briefly, but I want you to say it again. What standard deck are you playing right now?
The one that cheats.
Which one is that?
Boros Angels.
That's the most, like, you sound like you're a brand new to EDH player. You're like, you're the new guy who came in the shop and you're like, dude, I built a Boros Angels deck and it's awesome.
It's this deck
But
is
this is
really
really a good,
powerful.
it's genuinely a good standard deck.
Yes.
But in EDH, like I've seen that player so many times. The guy who comes into the shop and is like, "Oh no, this is an all-star deck. I built Gisela Angels. It's sweet."
And we're going to cover that deck in a few weeks. Hi, Dr. Mike.
Right, yeah, that's true. He does have an Aurelia Angels deck we're going to talk about.
See, Chris's standard deck would be great for 60 to 100 by Matt Morgan.
We will have to mention that to Matt. Yeah. Social media. Anything exciting happening in the world of social media this week, Max?
We have our Guilds of Ravnica box winner from Flipside Gaming to
that's right.
announce.
That came out on Monday.
Yes. So the winner is Zachary Taylor from Florida.
Congratulations, Zachary Taylor.
I hope you weren't a part of the hurricane.
Did we I think we talked to him on Twitter a little bit about it too, or he's something. I can't remember what went down. I've had a strange week this week, so I'm really out of the
I don't
loop.
remember either.
Today's Thursday, right?
Yes.
It is,
Okay.
yeah. I've been completely out of the loop
Today's
as well.
Thursday. The Packers play on Monday and the Ducks
I
play
know
on
that's
Saturday.
so weird that the Packers are playing on Monday. That's during my modern night. I've been debating if I'm going to skip it or not.
They won't play the game in the shop just for you.
No, I might just stream it on my phone while I'm playing. Just be like, looking at it and be like, oh, yeah, you play that? Cool. Oh, I'm dead. That's awesome. Okay.
So congratulations, Zach.
Congratulations.
Thank you for supporting us through FlipsideGaming.com. We appreciate that and everybody who supports us through that shop.
Yes, thank you very much.
While talking about Flipside, though, if you
Yes.
do head over there and use promo code CMDR, you'll get 10% off your order.
I believe it has to be all capital letters. Someone discovered
it
this
does.
week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because they tried to get into the entry before the contest was over, and they're like, "What's the promo code?" They're like, "CMDR." Oh, it has to be all caps.
Yeah.
And I'm even like, I had no idea.
See, I type with a caps lock on at all times, so I didn't notice. No, I'm like, I'm your grandma sending forwarded emails.
I was about to say, so does my father,
Right, yeah. I'm kidding. I don't.
the IT professional.
Right, exactly.
Well, you guys would love my notes because my notes are always in a font that's just capitals.
I do mine in red.
Yellow, so you can't hardly read it.
I tried that with like the super light blue one week, and I'm like, oh,
That's too much.
bad idea.
Yep.
So thank you to everybody for heading over to Flipside and supporting us that way. You can also support us via Patreon by searching CMDR Central.
We are easy to find there, and we had 2 new supporters this week as well.
We do. So thank you to DJ and Jake, 2 one-name people. So
Yes,
that's
indeed.
fun.
Thanks a lot, gentlemen. And
No last names to butcher?
Nope.
Yeah, no, right.
Shucks.
We've gotten better about that, but we did have somebody, I can't remember who it was. Someone's like, "You guys butchered mine a little bit the first time, but it wasn't too bad."
We apologize.
We did.
I'm perfectly fine with it. I know during, God, what was that? A pre-release. I had to read standings off
Oh, that's never fun.
as Savannah was handing out packs, and I'm reading names, and I butchered one person's name. They're like, nope, that's wrong. And then I butchered this gal's name. She's like, you can try again. I'm like, I don't want to.
I believe you may have, was it you that butchered mine intentionally, but like at the,
Probably.
at the Guild's pre-release. Like Dana Rash? Every teacher I ever had in college.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah, they always screwed it up.
I can understand screwing your first name up, but not your last name.
Yeah, I don't know why. They're afraid to say Roach, and I don't know how they would get Dana wrong too, but they would all routinely get them both wrong.
Well, the first time I ever met you, I couldn't remember if it was Dana or Dana, and Meg at the time was like, "What is it?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'll figure it out in a couple weeks."
I do that when I'm at the shop playing with people, and I forget their name. I just don't say anything. And then someone says their name. I'm like, haha, that's their name.
I've texted you guys before in the shop and been like, this guy across from me, what's his name again? Because I know I've been introduced 3 times and I've forgotten it now. So
Most of the time I turn to Nate and I'm just like,
Right.
Nate, who is that? And he's like, oh, that's so-and-so. I'm like, okay, awesome. He's like, why? I'm like, oh, don't worry about it.
Don't ask questions you don't want answers to.
Technology is so useful for things like that.
Otherwise, we do have our new contests to announce.
We do.
So for Twitter this month, we are going to be giving away 2 Magic the Gathering core set sampler booster packs.
From M12?
From one of the M's, maybe 12, maybe 9th. Best start with the 9th edition core game.
Really? That shows how closely I paid attention to these packs we're giving away.
Tron Lands.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
I have no idea what's even
We're
in
not giving
packs.
these away anymore. Chris is going to crack them all.
Here's the thing. If they're giving away, if you guys pull a foil Tron Land, I want to see a picture posted on Twitter.
I wonder, I'll bet that there probably isn't foils in the sampler packs, but who knows? That's the mystery. We're giving you away these mystery packs. Also, there in honor of being in Ravnica, we have this cool original Ravnica life counter thing. We'll put a picture on Twitter of it because I don't even know how to describe it.
It's the cardboard life counter with the circle spinner.
That has Sisters of Stone Death art on it from the original Ravnica block.
And just so you know, if you ever go to a sanctioned tournament, you cannot use this.
Nope.
You
Really?
must use pen and paper.
Oh, okay. All right. You can have it there to show off your sweet Commander Central
Right?
Twitter giveaway bling. So that will be this month's Twitter giveaway. And to Patreon supporters, what do they get?
For our Patreon supporters, we were generously donated a copy of the Commander 13 Mind Seas pre-con.
That's the one with Jaleva.
And the True Name Nemesis and all that fun
It
stuff.
doesn't come with True Name Nemesis.
It's only got 98 cards in it. And there's a mysterious slit in the side of the packaging.
I tried to get the cellophane on as best as I could
Right.
the second time. This was donated from a friend of the show, Mick. He hangs out at our local game store, D20.
And listens. And actually at the Guild's pre-release, he's like, I don't support you guys on Patreon, but can I just give you some for a giveaway as a thank you since I listened to the show? And I'm like, all right, sure.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
And I will not try to pronounce Mick's last name because I know I'll butcher it.
Right, exactly.
But I know how it's basically spelled.
I was going to ask Jerry, but I'm like, no, we'll just go with Mick.
So thank you, Mick, anyway, for supporting the show. And we will be giving Mick's generous contribution away to you guys, our Patreon supporters, next month.
Yes, so as long as you become a Patreon supporter by, we'll say, November 1st, because we'll be recording on the 1st probably.
All right, good deal. Sounds good.
I do have to interject here
Uh-oh.
and have to say that one Jerry Eldridge cannot win this, and one Dan Mel cannot win this.
His friends can't win it?
They
All
are
right.
close friends of Mick's, so
and show supporters, that's true. All right, we can omit them.
evil people.
Chris said it, not me. Everybody was going to be included, but whatever.
Bring it.
If they have any objections, they can take it up with Chris.
Yeah.
That seems
You
fair.
know where I am. I'm at D20, located on, what is that? Hamilton Avenue?
Fairfax.
Fairfax?
Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Max and I are there on Tuesdays. Chris is there all the time.
Every day, but usually Thursday.
Because you're here.
Because you're here recording, right? That's why
Yep.
you're not there.
And lately we just go there after.
Right, yes.
Speaking of that, I do have to go there again tonight if you would like to join me.
I haven't eaten yet today.
I can swing you by the Taco Bell.
Okay.
Our new supporter, our new Patreon, Taco Bell, has been giving us money. So we're going to shout out to Taco Bell. Thank you very much. You make great chalupas.
Nacho fries.
I don't even know if they have nacho fries anymore.
No, they're gone again.
I give it a week. They'll be back.
Probably.
I don't know when the last time I've actually eaten Taco Bell sober. My wife always wants Taco Bell when she's like been drinking, so I go there. But other than that, we don't.
Get a
We
burrito.
go to Taco Bell.
Yep. Got to get your burritos.
Oof.
I finally heard the story behind that last night.
The look on Nate and Jesse's faces was just priceless when I'm in the McDonald's drive-thru at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, you guys got those burritos still?
Like you're in Kentucky. Chris, where can people find us on social media?
Oh, on the social media.
Yes.
Like Twitter.
Yes, indeed.
At CMDR Central. Facebook. Search CMDR Central. I really wish I could be like William Shatner and just like do that properly. And here it is.
Captain's log.
YouTube, you can find us, CMDR Central. YouTube is mainly just our shows and other stuff like that. Online, you can find us at cmdrcentral.com. But like I said, for Twitter, that's probably the best place to reach us at.
Yes,
One
indeed.
of us replies relatively quickly. It's usually not me because by the time I look at my phone for the notification, it's already been like cut off because someone else already looked at it.
We've already intervened and
Yep.
replied.
As we said last week, Chris handles the Facebook more than the Twitters.
Yeah. I think Raphael's got my number on Facebook, though.
He said it's his goal now to call you out every week for something.
I hope he does. It makes my life interesting when I go on. It's like, oh, and you have a new comment from Raphael. I'm like, ooh, what's he got to say now?
Okay, let's talk about threat assessment. Because we mentioned that last week. Chris mentioned people are bad at it, and we had people asking us to talk about it a little bit. So let's talk about it. The first thing I want to ask you guys is give me one sentence that you think people need to know about threat assessment and EDH.
I'm going to say threat assessment differs vastly between each game you play or each pod you play in.
I would agree with that.
I guess the best way that I sum this up in one sentence is, so to assess a threat in a multiplayer game, you need to realize what's about to happen when things hit the field based on the commanders that are given to you.
Okay.
So, like, that's your guaranteed information is each commander. So if turn 1 they go Soul Ring into Signet into whatever, and you're playing against, like, Joyride deck or something like that, you're just like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
My thing would, if there's one thing I would tell you to bear in mind when you're assessing threat in EDH, remember that by virtue of being multiplayer, threat assessment is way different in Commander than it is in other formats. Things that apply or don't apply to Commander might not apply or not apply to other formats, and you need to remember that and don't get stuck in the modern mindset or the standard mindset because there's a lot of differences, and I'm sure we're going to go into a few of those here. So first of all, what is different? Like, let's talk about some things that are different when you're playing multiplayer. Max, your hand is up. I call on you.
EDH is a singleton format.
It is. That is very true.
So, yes, the chances of answers still exist, but it's not like people are running 4 copies of Rift and 4 copies of English Unmaking.
Right.
So, yes, you have to worry about them, but maybe not as a degree you have to in a format where you can use more than 1 copy of a card.
If you see a lightning bolt,
you're done.
That's the only lightning bolt you're going to see. That doesn't mean they don't have a lightning strike or a chain lightning or something. Right. But for the most part, when you see a card, that's just it. And very frequently, it's also the way decks are constructed. You're probably not going to see those cards. Like, someone may run lightning bolt because it's not a terrible removal spell, particularly in a fast meta. So you might see it, but just because you see it, you're not going to see every other variant on it. People probably run a couple of those for removal, and that's it. It's not like a modern burn deck where when you see that burn spell, you're like, oh, there's 12 more of the variants in that deck.
1 of 20 down.
Yeah, no, that's a good
how
one.
many cards
do
you have left in your hand?
Right, exactly.
Uh-oh.
And you just assume those are 4 lightning bolts and 2 rifts or something, yeah.
The big thing that I want people to get into their mind is not everything is meant to be targeting you.
Absolutely. Just because something's scary doesn't mean it scares you.
Yep. A big one, I could say, like that white enchantment that makes everything cost 2 more.
Or of silence.
It's not meant to target you. It's just meant to be there as a hindrance for everybody.
Sure.
It's helping the player who played it stay in tempo with everybody because they might be playing mono white and they're playing mono white, so they need all the help they can get.
Exactly.
The example that this came up a couple weeks ago. Someone played a Sheila Dread, and Sheila Dread's not a fun card to see hit the field for the most part because you sack something during every player's upkeep, and that player brings something back from their graveyard to play. Sheila Dread's a scary card, but if you're the person sitting there and you've got one creature in play that's already done its work, if it's a Reclamation Sage or something, and the Sheila Dread player's graveyard is empty because something happened previously or they played it earlier or whatever. Meanwhile, someone else has 4 creatures in play and they're all good. Yes, Sheila Dread's a scary card, but maybe you don't care about it. Like, maybe it's not the threat, even though it's a threatening card and it's oftentimes a threat, and it would be a threat if this was 1v1, because if it's 1v1, it's kind of a soft lock where whenever you play a creature, it's going to get sacrificed next turn. You have to watch out for that. That maybe isn't the same in Commander where you can afford to sit back and say, okay, I'm going to let somebody else solve this problem for me because I have nothing to lose and that person does, and odds are that they will deal with it before me.
Yep.
So That's a very good one as well. What else we got?
This is a little greedy and I suppose egotistical, but other players can and usually will take care of threats for you.
I
So
100%
you don't
agree with
need
that.
to blow all your removal on every single threat.
So that's the difference. If the person across from you in Modern plays something you don't want in play, you are the only person that can answer it.
Yep.
It's a threat to you no matter what. That's not the case in multiplayer. Number one, you can set it out, like I mentioned the shield red thing. Number two, someone else can also deal with it.
Yep.
So
and usually the person who deals with it, then you got to think on that and say,
why did they deal with it?
Yep. Why did they get rid of that? There must be something going on.
That person has only one Llanowar elf in play. Why did they just kill that shield red? That's strange. Oh, they just played a Terastodon or
Yep.
whatever. There's
Yeah.
always that kind of thing is what you have to watch out for. I would say one thing that's really different is because of the 100 card pool in Commander, particularly like Max said, they're unique cards. The amount of variables in that deck is way different than it is in single player. So like talking about burn again, when you sit down against a Modern burn deck, there are variants on that burn deck, but you roughly know, okay, this one may have lightning strike in it and another version may not. But you know what's going to happen more or less. Just because someone plays one card, there's a whole lot of other cards that could be in there that do a whole bunch of different things, and understand that's a whole different thing to deal with than it is in a 1v1 format with 4 of any card and you're capped at 60.
Exactly.
Something to go along with what Chris just said. EDH is a political game. Not only will your opponents take care of threats for you, but you can persuade them to take care of threats for you.
There is no such thing as politics in other formats.
Especially if you've already played like 3 games with them and you told them numerous times that they should do this and do this and do this and it backfired on them. And then you look at them and be like, I told you so. Maybe they'll listen to you in the 4th game.
Do they ever listen to you?
No. It's very sad.
It is.
You're just trying to help.
I am. That's all I'm trying to do. Help myself into winning.
Right, exactly.
The truth comes out.
Okay, so let's talk about factors you need to take into consideration when you're assessing the threat you're dealing with. So the first one of the first ones that I think of that I think people often miss is pay attention to the colors that are being played. I think people don't do that, and I think you need to pay attention to that more when you're trying to figure out who's the biggest threat at the table. And also bear in mind that can change depending on the game and your deck and the current situation. I'll say the blue player's generally very dangerous if you're about to do a bunch of things because they may have counterspells. But if your main concern is protecting your board state when you have 9 dudes in play, yes, blue has Rift and I guess Evacuation, but white has way more board wipes available and they're frequently played. Not that Evacuation isn't a decent card, but Rift is played a lot. But the rest of the blue mass bounces don't see that much play. Day of Judgment is like 10th down the list of white board wipes, and it's still in a ton of decks.
There's
So
no reason not to run Day of Judgment,
Sure.
in my opinion.
Or I mean, like a Wrath or a Steer or Cleansing Nova or...
I have an
there's a
article for you to
gazillion
read
options.
then about Day of Judgment because
Got me again, Chris.
he got himself.
so consistent. I did. I set you up. I put that in a T for you. But yeah, so like you need to understand the color matters of the person you're playing against based on who's the biggest threat, but that's going to change depending on your situation as well. So I try to keep an eye on that because I've made that call before. I can kill both these 2 players right now that are both tapped out, and that guy's playing blue, and next turn he can counterspell me, or he can have a Rift, and that guy's playing green, red, and he might have a Blasphemous Act, but that's less likely and less scary to me than that Rift at instant speed is. I'm going to kill the blue player. So I think you need to pay attention to those kind of variables because that's not something you ever care about in Modern or Standard or wherever.
Yeah, because you're just playing against one person, so you should have all the knowledge that you need when you're playing against one person.
So what else do you guys take into consideration when you are assessing the threat situation?
I said it earlier in the one sentence. So the commander that you're facing off against, all of them. So basically, we'll say, this is really generic, and this is going to go a shout out to Luke Witten with this. If you're playing against Angus McKenzie, and they have played nothing else, and then they play Doubling Season.
Oh, snap.
Are you scared of that doubling season out of an Angus Mackenzie player?
You should.
Or are you scared out of a doubling season when it comes down against a Gave player?
Right. You should be, because you're going to lose the game next turn.
Yeah, but you don't know that off the information that you have.
Correct.
So that's knowing the commanders and what their possibilities are that they're capable of doing.
But here's what I'll say about that Angus Mackenzie deck, and Luke he used to be on a show with Max and I years ago. He's a old friend of ours, friend of the show's. Luke had an Angus Mackenzie Super Friends deck. And I remember it took me a few games, multiple games, to realize, if it's down to him and you've just lost the game.
Pretty much.
If you get down to that point, no matter what his board state is, if he has Angus out and any kind of protection in hand, whether it's any kind of counter spell, you're just turbo fogged in it. Like, he always has a fog in hand for the couple mana that you can tap
So
Angus
I
for.
think
It's 3.
he played like every fog that there was.
Right. He also had a bunch of fogs in addition to Angus. But like, if Angus was out, you're done then.
Yep.
Like, and even if you kill Angus, he probably has a counter spell available to stop it. And then it's just a matter of time till some combo of planeswalkers come down that you can't deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he won't have doubling season, but he has a doubling season that happens even faster. So there's those decks where you have to understand their specific beats. I remember playing against a Thraxamundar zombie deck when I first started playing Commander, and I got to that point where I realized, if Thrax comes down, I need to have 2 blockers at all times. I need to have 1 to sacrifice and 1 to stop Thrax, or he's going to hit me for 7 immediately, and I'm losing 2 creatures, or at least 1 to the sacrifice clause. At that point, I'm on a 2 more hit clock, and he's gained enough advantage that it's tough to stop at that point. So I needed to have things in play. So that's like the first situation where I started actively counting mana of my opponent to be like, when can he get Thrax out? Occasionally he would like do a 2-land turn or something out of the blue, on turn 5 or something when I thought I was safe. But like, for the most part, you could figure it out. But I realized I had to, with that deck, I had to figure it out. So yeah, the commander makes a huge difference versus, say, my Asperia deck, my Sphinx deck. Nobody cares about when Asperia comes out.
I do.
Sure.
Asperia I'm fine with.
Against your Dromoka deck, maybe because it's it's a 6 damage flying blocker you have to deal with. But like, most people, it's not going to change the game or change and it doesn't impact what I'm doing in the game. Whereas my Glissa deck does, or my Reki deck does.
Kill Reki on site. If anyone ever plays against a Reki deck, please take our advice and kill Reki on
Chris,
site.
I told you to stop podcasting drunk. Don't give people bad advice and tell them things that aren't true. Reki's harmless. He's an old man with a guitar.
Time
I
out.
don't even think he has a guitar, does he?
It's actually like a sitar or something that's, I don't know, it's the equivalent thereof.
I can start drinking on the show again?
Yeah, you should, right. It's been a while. You're just drinking Dr. Pepper tonight. Our new sponsor, Dr. Pepper, brought to you by Commander Central. Okay, what else? What else we got here?
I try to use the player's experience to my advantage. So if a newer player walks in, so newer players are easily swayed to do maybe what you want them to do. Like, hey, that doubling season is just going to be really bad news for everybody when it probably really isn't. And maybe doubling season is the bad example, but that's going to be really bad for everybody next turn. Okay, I'm going to remove it. They also don't have maybe the knowledge of what cards are threatening. Like, is a Blind Obedience really that threatening to a new player? Who knows? If you're playing an aggro deck and every one of your creatures is coming in tapped, yeah, that's threatening to you. So, the lack of experience or the knowledge of every card and what it does really sways how you can judge threats.
Sure. Well, that's a good point with the Blind Obedience, though. That I have this point later on in here, but understand there's a difference between being annoyed by a card and it being a threat. Because Blind Obedience is really annoying. But outside, like if you're playing a dedicated haste deck or something, it probably isn't a threat. It can be. But for the most part, it's just irritating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those cards, like we mentioned with the Phyrexian Arena, it gets difficult to rationalize using your targeted removal on Blind Obedience when there's so many scarier things out there.
Agreed.
So like that's a threat assessment thing too. Understand the difference between a card being annoying or irritating or frustrating to deal with and it being the thing that you need to blow your spell on. Because those are very different things. Because there's also cards that aren't annoying at all, but are threats. Like Fervor doesn't impede you at all, but if you aren't paying attention, the Fervor that you're going to get killed by someone who was a Fervor out because they're just going to drop some big creature, drop a Molten Steel Dragon at 42 life, blow 20 into it and one-shot you.
Yep.
So one thing I wanted to point out is I think there's 4 things in Commander you can really pay attention to that affect assessing the threat. I think the first is the board state. Evaluate what's on the field that you can see. Second one was what's in the graveyard, because you can see what's in the graveyard. You know, okay, that guy's got a stocked graveyard and he's playing black. That's a threat, and you should be aware of, like, the graveyard does matter. Cards in hand absolutely matter, because the person at 1 card is way less dangerous than the person who's at 7. And plenty of times I've seen someone cast Decree of Pain, draw 18, and then someone's like, okay, now we're all even. I'm like, no, you're not all even. Yes, there was just a board wipe. A board wipe just happened, but we're not all even right now. Yes, that person spent 8 mana and is tapped out. Things still aren't even.
You just got to look at that person and give them the rock eyebrows.
Right. Nope. That's not where we're at.
You jabroni.
And the last one I would mention is mana available or resources available, because that person who just dropped Amrari's Wake last turn and it went all the way around the board and they untapped with it is way more dangerous than the person who is only at 7 lands when the person who's at 8 can tap them for 16. So that's a thing that I watch for too. Those are like the 4 main things. In addition to, I guess, being aware that their commander can be a problem. That maybe would be the 5th one. So those are the things I watch for. Is there anything else you guys watch for, particularly when you try to assess the threat at the table?
I watch everything.
You have to.
It's something I
those
pay
are all
attention
things.
to. I watch how people are playing. Like, I'll notice if someone's slow playing, like they're like, oh, I cast this turn and then just pass. And it's like, okay, you still have like 8 mana up and 6 cards in your hand. I know you can cast something else. So you're slow playing something.
My answer to that is always, I've just got all lands in hand and I'm bad at Magic.
All board wipes.
It's all right. I've been top decking lands for 9 straight turns.
And it's really funny, like that 1 out of 20 games, he shows your hand and
sometimes
it
it happens. It legitimately does happen sometimes.
Similar to what Chris said, I look at people's tells. So, like, if that mono black player is all of a sudden fumbling with his own graveyard, or I'm guilty of doing it myself. If you see me fumbling with my graveyard in my Jamoka deck, I have Seasons Past in my hand.
Sure.
And
right.
I'm ready to let that rip next turn.
And that is actually a fault I see with EDH players, is all of you, I can say you guys are all guilty of it. You stack your deck or your graveyard all in one stack.
Yes.
Now, being a competitive player, my graveyard is set in a row.
Right.
So I can see each card that's in there.
But also,
so I just have to look over and look at it. I don't even have to pick it up or nothing.
But also in EDH, you tend to get much bigger graveyards, so it's kind of tough to do that.
Well, if you were playing Graveyard Hate, you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Great point, Chris. Good thing we did a show on that someone could listen to.
Right?
Hear about how to hate on someone's graveyard. Like cards in hand, do you guys really pay attention to that one very closely? Because that's one I do watch, but I don't know if people pay attention to that one. I'm wondering if you guys watch it at all.
To a point.
Like I don't count like
if they're
that guy's
drawing,
at 5, that guy's at 6. He's scarier.
If they're drawing a lot, then I start paying attention to it. But if they're only drawing 1 card a turn, then I'm watching what they're playing, so I can basically assume how many cards they already have in hand, so I don't have to ask or nothing like that.
I pay attention to it, but I more often than not, I'll end up just saying cards in hand, and it's usually because here I am giving away all my secrets. I'm trying to if I'm down to like I want to play 1 of 2 spells, and the Simic player has 4 cards in hand, and the blue-black player has 3 cards in hand. I need to figure out, okay, which one of them is going to have a counter spell, or something like that, and which of the 2 cards that I want to play might draw that out, and then play and still have enough mana, or maybe next turn play the spell I actually wanted to play. Like it's a win-win for me because either way, one of them might resolve, hopefully, or they might get in a counter war, and then I just sit back and laugh.
That's the best way to deal with a counter war is just not participate.
Right.
Only way to win that contest is to not play.
Play Counterflux. I think
There you
that's
go,
the one.
I guess.
Just counter all spells on the stack.
Yeah.
Flusterstorm.
I don't know if I've ever seen a Flusterstorm cast in Commander.
I have.
Have you?
Counter spells are a trap in Commander, in my opinion. But that's a topic for a different day.
Sure. All right. So how much do you guys pay attention to what you know about the deck based on past games when you judge threat assessment?
Kill Reki first, kill Edric first.
It depends on the players.
Okay.
Like who I'm playing against. Certain people that we play with at the shop, I know for a fact how their deck's built. After playing with them numerous times, it's not really changed too much. Or if it has been changed, we've talked about the changes, so you know what's happening. Now, new players, when they sit down with their deck, Let's say I played them one other time. It's like, okay, this deck could be 100 times different than it was last time.
Right.
So now I really have to be on edge.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between kind of what Chris was saying. The people, I guess, like us, that we have our set 4 decks no matter what, and they only really change against new set releases, and
For the most part,
the changes are minimal because we are so highly tuned at this level where do you really want to cut card A for card B or even try card B?
Sure. Very rarely are we swapping out 10 cards or something. It's usually
Right.
like 1 or 2.
But to the point of like, do you like bring that over from game to game? Like, yeah, if I get beat, I'll be salty towards that player, but I don't think I'm going to purposely go into game 2 with them.
Sure.
And they whip out a completely different deck. I'm not going to be like, oh, yep, you still get to die first because you killed me last game.
But now you do pay attention. Okay, that person did kill me last game. I know that deck's pretty explosive and can do this, this, and this.
Right.
And that person's playing Odric Soldier Tribal. And I've seen them make a ton of play mistakes or not understand this interaction. And that's something I think you do. It would behoove you to pay attention to as well. Like a good player is much more of a threat than a bad player is. That's like
anytime
simple.
I lose Torment of Hailfire, I just kill that person first.
Right. They're the first person you kill immediately.
Yes, I'm dying second.
But we didn't really talk about that in the multiplayer format part. But like that's also a difference between multiplayer and single player. In single player, whether the person is good or bad or not, you're still trying to kill them as fast and efficiently as possible.
Yep.
You don't care. Bad or good, you're still going to kill them. In Commander, it often is beneficial to let the bad player live because you want the better player gone faster. So that's an evaluation you have to make when you're assessing threat. That person's good. They're a bigger threat than that person who has been playing 4 weeks and misses a ton of things because they don't, necessarily know how the game works. I'm not saying take advantage of that player, and maybe there are times you want to throw the game to that player to be nice or whatever, but when you're evaluating threat, they're probably way less of a threat most of the time. Maybe even if they have a better board state, like maybe even if they look like they're ahead, they're still probably oftentimes not the threat as the experienced player who can win the game quickly.
Yep. Actually, to a new player, having a big board state is actually a detriment, in my opinion, because there's so much going on and they miss so much.
Decision paralysis is absolutely a real thing that happens in Med, and particularly in Commander, where if you have too many options, you're just going to get killed.
I also think with new player stuff, so like if Chris or Dana or any of the other people we regularly play with walk into the shop and say, hey, I'm going to try this brand new deck out, I'm not going to take the phrase of it's a brand new deck really strongly.
Sure.
Because if they're anything like us, they've goldfished that deck on Tapped Out or anything 100,000 times before they even put it together on paper. And then in paper, they've goldfished it 100,000 times. Mm-hmm. So now they just want to see it against other people.
Right.
Where if a person I've maybe played with once in my entire life in the shop, or they're new to the shop, and they say, hey, this is my new deck. This is my normal deck. This is my new deck. I'm going to let them have their day with their new deck because, A, they're new to the shop. I don't want to be that guy that pub stomps a new player, but I think it all depends on experience level again.
Well, here's an example of that I remember like clearly thinking about was in Vegas. When I sat down at a table, I don't remember what day it was, but I was playing in a 4-player pod, and like 2 people I didn't know sat down, and we were all just going to play a game. But I was playing with the 4th person was Don Miner, who basically like started EDH Rec. I'm familiar enough with Don's decks. I've like looked over his deck list before when he's asked for help building decks and we're troubleshooting stuff or just like goofing around. And I also watched him picking up cards that day. I absolutely knew. I don't care it doesn't matter who the other 2 people were. Number 1, he built EDH Rec. He clearly knows Commander. Number 2, I'm aware of what his decks are like. He absolutely was a threat in that game, regardless of who the other 2 dudes were. And he'll be the first person that would have admitted that too. But like his mono block chainer deck is just dirty, and he was absolutely the threat.
Tanawa.
Yeah, his Tanawa deck is strong for being a wonky deck too. Well, that's the other thing about, again, talking about evaluating the player. That Tanawa deck's wonky, but was a very strong deck. His trainer deck's got a bunch of weird old wonky cards in it, and it's also a really strong deck. That should tell you something about the player as well. If they're playing a bunch of old, weird, obscure cards and they're doing powerful things with them, that player is probably really, really good. And you should bear that in mind when you make your threat assessment decisions. Whereas me, who remembers 1 out of every 10 abundance triggers, can maybe ignore me a little bit. Or
Never.
I'm just setting up all our listeners.
That's what you're doing.
I'm playing the long con here, guys.
I'll play devil's advocate.
No, don't listen. So is there any particular thing that you guys think you view as a threat that other people maybe miss out on or underplay, whereas you're like, no, that's a threat. Whether it's a card or a play or an action, what do you guys see that you guys think you're clued in on that people tend to miss?
I actually said mine already earlier. It was the tells. So
Okay. Which I don't pay that much attention to. So that's one I probably should watch a little more.
I'm going to name a card, and I guess we can just lump it into a group of cards too, but we'll label this card for the first one that's popping in my mind is Ashnod's Altar. And we're going to label this as sack outlets. I notice a lot of people ignore them. There is a reason that there is a sack outlet in the deck. If you're ignoring that, then they're just going to go ham with it.
No one's running Ashnod's Altar in their deck just in case they happen to need 2 mana and want to sacrifice a creature. But no, you're right. Like, no one's running Ashnod's Altar just for the fun of it or just in case they want to sacrifice a creature. It's almost always part of some bigger plan. I guess maybe if you're making a ton of tokens and you're like, oh, it's worth sacking 3 tokens for 6 mana or something. But for the most part, it's almost always part of some bigger scheme.
Yes. I don't know how many times I've watched people just ignore them, and I'm like, no, don't.
No one's running Birthing Pod as a sack outlet. It's not a sack outlet. If someone resolves a Birthing Pod, 99% of the time, it's part of a chain that leads to them winning the game.
really?
That's how Birthing... Let me explain Birthing Pod.
I know. It's Yisan, essentially.
There's a reason
Right, yeah,
it is
basically.
banned in Modern.
And it will be perfectly fine as a sack outlet.
Yep.
Like, if that's all you're using it for, it's perfectly fine. But no one's doing that. There's a pod chain there that's going to kill you. Chris, get any more?
Yeah. Mana doublers is another one. Whether it be Cage Sun, Gauntlet of Power,
Vernal Bloom.
any of that. I don't know how many times I've watched someone just be like, oh, he's got Mirari's Wake out there, and I'm going to play Council Judgment, and I'm going to choose something different. And I'm like, what?
As someone who runs quite a few mana doublers in his mono decks, I'm genuinely shocked at the amount of times I'm allowed to play them
Yeah.
and allowed to have them sit there while people continue to play Magic like I'm not just doing twice the things they're doing. Because I am. That's what I'm doing. I'm cheating. I'm cheating when I play a Cage Sun in a monocolor deck. I'm cheating at Magic, and you're letting me do it.
In those instances, for me, like, whenever you go to play your mana doubler, though, it's like, that's the second scariest thing on the board. It always happens to be, like, that's the circumstance when I'm in games with Dana.
And again, talking about threat assessment, sometimes it isn't a big deal if your hand's empty.
Do you remember that Dana also told us a while back?
I want to be the second scariest thing on the board.
I don't remember
do.
what episode that was, but we
like 2
talked
weeks
about
ago.
that.
I 100% do. But that's tough to get around. Like, okay, I can, even if I tell you that I'm doing that, I'm still the second scariest thing on the board. Like, that doesn't change. You knowing that I'm intentionally waiting till something worse is in play before I play my thing doesn't change the fact that something worse is in play.
Just makes me want to run like Thoughtseize effects against Dana and just be like, oh, you played that? Oh, let's see what else you got going on.
Jester's Cap him all out of his deck.
I actually pulled Gesture. I had Gesture's Cap in my Lissa deck once upon a time, and it was just, I got sick of like looking through libraries. I'm like, nah, I'm pulling it. I had it just because I played a token deck a lot, and I'm like, I'm just going to grab Doubling Season and Parallelize and Cathar's Crusade, and it was worth it just for that.
Oh, yeah.
Any more, Chris?
Oh, yeah. So let's see. I got one,
Give me-
two,
give-
three,
so lay 'em on
four-
us.
4 more. We'll start with one that we actually talked about last week, I do believe. And that is graveyards. People do not assess the threat
Yeah,
of the
it's-
graveyard. I'm
I
going
don't
to
know
keep
how often
repeating
we can
it.
keep saying that,
Yes.
right?
And this is a shout out to Ben Johnston because he harassed me hard yesterday about this. He's like, I told you guys not to talk about the graveyard anymore.
People keep, like, he's not the only person. We've had multiple people tell us to stop telling people to run Graveyard Age. Selfishly, kind of like me saying don't destroy Reki.
It is a huge threat on board. And so many people just ignore it.
And it's almost never a like Phyrexian Arena threat where it's one card a turn. Usually, not always, but usually when people do something with their graveyard, it's something that's huge. Now, it might not necessarily be Rise of the Dark Realms or something, but it could pretty easily be Living Death, or it could be Zombie Apocalypse, or like there's a lot of busted stuff you can do with that graveyard.
What's the green card that we love, Max?
Seasons
Seasons
Past.
Past, there you go. Yeah, I mean, there's like just so many things.
Yep. I mean, even just regrowthing a card out of the graveyard that they already cast is huge advantage for them.
If you ever see someone discard things in a weird way and you're like, huh, why did they discard that card at this point in the game? Because they're planning on bringing it back. That's a threat.
This is actually why I bring this up, is because I have done that in my Alessia deck. I discard it, and I'm just like, go. And or like for like a card draw where I was like, oh, I'll discard that. And I'm like,
Huh.
okay,
Well,
I'll take my turn. And I'm just like, ha, 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 ha.
you should be terrified about why he discarded that card. That's a threat.
Another one I have on here, and might just be me personally, but token generation. Cards that create tokens for any amount of reason, like
Awakening Zone.
yes, that's a big one. Stuff like that. A lot of people just ignore it.
Yeah.
Especially when the tokens make you mana.
Yes. I mean, even if they're not making you mana, let's say you have the green elf that creates tokens when he attacks or whatever. You know which one I'm talking about, the 1-drop, where you pay mana into him.
No idea what you're talking.
Reese redeemed.
Reese the
There we
Redeem.
go.
Yep. I've seen a lot of people just ignore that because like, oh, they're just
One
a
drop.
bunch of
yeah.
they're just little guys.
Yeah.
No, when little guys turn into 10/10s, it's a big deal.
Yes. Or when there's 30 of them.
Yep.
That's a big deal too.
Another one I have is continual card draw. This is a huge threat for me, anyways. We discussed Phyrexian Arena and how it has actually been bumped down.
Sure.
Because you can't really remove it. And my final one, and this is going to be lumped into card draw, and I don't actually see a lot of people play this anymore, but it's Edric, Spymaster of Trest.
Yeah.
Edric's not your friend. Don't tell yourself Edric's your friend and you're just going to draw a couple cards. I'm just going to draw a couple cards. It's fine. That's drug talk, kids. And if we learned anything in the 80s,
Just one hit, man. Just one hit.
don't just do the one hit. Edric's a pusher. Don't buy any of it from him.
No.
The first one's free, but he's going to charge you after that once you're addicted.
It's definitely a card that is a threat assessment that people need to realize. Like the value versus the downside of attacking your opponent over attacking the Edric player.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you're going to net, let's say you net 2 cards. I would rather pump 7 damage into the Edric player than net 2 cards.
Particularly because there's a really good chance when it comes around to their turn, they're going to draw 8 cards.
Yep.
Yeah.
And maybe take an extra turn and draw 8 or 10 more, and then maybe take an extra turn after that, and you're just lost the game.
Exactly.
Along with Edric, though, like group hug strategies, I mean, we've all kind of publicly claimed we aren't fans of them for various reasons, but
They're fun if I want to play like a 4-hour game.
right.
Just
But
sit down and do nothing.
Right.
if your opponent's main goal in the first third of the game is to help his opponents, that's not what's really going to happen the entire game.
It also screws up the threat of the game. It's really tough to evaluate who the threat is then when the group hug player is like mixing up the signals and screwing up who has the advantage. It's tough to
Right.
gauge that sometimes.
Like K&T, you either play a land out of your hand or you get to draw a card. Well, that's great. My opponent's helping me ramp or they're helping me draw. Well, they're doing both.
Yep.
Yes. And you need to realize that when you're evaluating the board state as well. I think a lot of these things come down to resources, whether it's cards in your graveyard or resources or cards in hand or things on board or mana available. Like a lot of it comes down to who has more resources. And that person is like, if you evaluate nothing else but that, if you're just like doing a quick, I've got 5 seconds to evaluate this board state. If all you do is figure out who has the most resources, they're probably the scariest. Maybe not always, but like in just a quick snapshot of the table, the person with the most resources is probably the biggest threat. So yeah, I agree with all of those. Those are the ones I think people tend to miss all of those in different ways. The example I used before was Decree of Pain, but I've seen that one multiple times. Just because something visually on the board looks like it's even doesn't mean it is. Just because Edric looks like we're all going to get a chance to draw a few cards doesn't mean the Edric person doesn't have ability to take advantage of that way more than you do. So yeah, I like those answers as well, Chris. So what are things that maybe you downplay or you don't view as threats, which is maybe this is the opposite, that other people do tend to get wound up about? Is there any specific ones you can think of there? Chris's hand is up.
Blue players.
So that blue players
Just
don't
blue
worry.
players in general, along with counter spells. It just, I guess it comes from playing so many other formats that I'm just like, whatever. It's part of the game.
There's part
so
of that
many
I
people
think
worry about it too
we
much.
Mentioned earlier, like just because someone's annoying doesn't mean they're the scariest person at the table.
Yep.
I think blue is the color that probably suffers from that the most, where they get targeted just for being blue because it's irritating to get your spells countered when maybe they aren't the scariest person in play. Because when they've countered 3 spells in a row, you're super annoyed and they look like they're in a really strong position, and their hand is empty. You need to like evaluate those two things. Just because someone just made 3 strong plays in a row that disrupted you and foiled your plans doesn't mean they can do it a 4th time or a 5th time or a 6th time. So like the threat assessment goes well beyond what's happened prior to the game, and it matters what happens from that point on. And you need to like bear that in mind. And we also talked about like understanding the person's deck or like knowing who the strong player is. But that you also have to remember that's not always relevant. Like just because the person has a good deck and because they're a good player doesn't mean they've had terrible draws this game. And the person who's really a cat, like I've got blown out before by genuinely not good decks played by genuinely not good players because stuff has just fallen their way.
That happens more often than not.
Oh yeah.
Well, because you also then get the factors where like everyone ignores them because they're beating up one another. So you get those kind of things that happen too.
Or the player who missed 3 land drops in a row and you just start ignoring them and all of a sudden,
for sure.
Oh, no, he hasn't missed a land drop over the next X turns.
And he's taken no damage and quietly put down 4 mana rocks and dropped a Sylvan Library and dropped an arena and Max, is there anything that you think maybe you overestimate or overlook at in terms of threat that other people... So Max, is there anything that you maybe underestimate as a threat or you don't pay enough attention to that you should pay more attention to?
I guess like deck strategies. So like, I'm not intimidated by like a stacks deck. Like, yeah, it's annoying to play against, but like Chris said about like blue players, it's part of the game. And if people want to play that type of game, that's fine by me. They're playing the game. That's really all that matters. And you play against it once, you learn the strengths and weaknesses of that said deck, and then you try again.
It's not personal.
Until they play a Tangle Wire and Brago and you just want to slap them.
You were okay with that game.
I was, because I was enjoying how everyone else was so feisty. And I'm just like, this is great.
I was being nice to her. I let it get down to 1, and then I'd blink it.
He had us locked out of the game, and everyone was so upset about it. I was like, this is awesome.
They could have just scooped.
Yeah. They could have destroyed Tangle Wire.
It is Brago, too. You should be prepared for that a little bit.
Disclaimer, that card is no longer in the deck.
It is not. That's
should
true.
be.
I mean, it's in the... If I had a sideboard.
So how about threat assessment mistakes you see? We've talked about a lot of mistakes, but let's go into some specific ones here. Max's hand is up. Calling on you, Max.
Screwing up the voting of a council's judgment.
Oh, man.
Because I'm totally guilty of this.
And that goes multiple ways. It's easy to... First of all, there's a math component to that. You have to be like, okay, if I vote for this, what's this guy going to vote for? You have to do that math in your head kind of as well. But that's a really interesting one to figure out. Like, man, that guy is not worried about this card, and I'm sure I feel like he should be. Yeah, I think that's one. Or at the very least, you see people's evaluation of cards is much different than yours.
I mean, Dana misses triggers late at night. Max can't do math.
Right, exactly.
Why don't I get to vote twice?
There is a card from Conspiracy.
Yeah, it's a blue instant. You can... You decide. There's one that lets you vote twice, and there's one that lets you decide how everybody else votes. One of them also replaces itself.
Oh, nice. Chris, what mistakes do you see people make with threat assessment?
Not answering threats, thinking you have time to do other stuff.
And sometimes you do. Like, here's the problem with a lot of this stuff. A lot of these answers go both ways. Because we also said that you do sometimes have time to answer the threat or let somebody else answer it. And you do.
Yep.
But sometimes you don't. Like, you have all the time in the world to let somebody else respond to it until you don't have any time anymore.
Yeah.
And then you have to.
This is another horrible example, but I'm going to throw it out there. Turn 5, someone plays a doubling season while playing Gave.
And they have mana to make the dude.
Well, no, we're just going to say turn 5. That's all they do. On turn 5, play
that uses their
season.
whole turn 5 up, but Gave's on the field.
No, Gave doesn't even have to be on the field. What's going to happen next?
Well, he's going to come and play with 10 counters on him next turn.
The next turn, he's going to come into play with 10 counters.
And make 20 saplings.
So that's a good one that I would say people mess up, too, is people aren't thinking ahead. They're looking at the board state. Okay, double season's out. I don't like that. But you need to look at all the information and kind of put those pieces together. Okay, double season's out and it didn't do anything. But Gabe is in the command zone right now, and he's going to be able to cast it next turn. So it's going to come and play with 10 counters. And he can spend 1 mana to make twice as many tokens anyway. So you have to think
and
those
he has
steps
that
ahead.
Ashnod's altar out that I told you needed to destroy earlier.
Which is probably going to do a bunch of things. Right. It's all about thinking about where all these things are going to go. I think people tend to get too focused on what's in front of them versus what's being implied by the board side of what could potentially happen. Any more from either of you two for mistakes you see a lot?
I guess this isn't really a threat assessment mistake, but more of a general mistake. And I notice this a lot, and this might just be a pet peeve of mine from being a competitive player. But since EDH is casual, I try to let it slide. But people not paying attention to the game.
Oh, I was just going to say that as well.
Sorry, I was on my phone. What was that?
Exactly. But that's like a big thing that gets to me. Even if you are playing casual, it is quite an annoyance when people's not paying attention. All of a sudden, like, oh, how did that happen? Well, buddy, let me tell you 3 turns ago when you were over there jaw-jacking and not paying attention, this and this and this happened. Oh, I could have countered that, or I could have. Too late.
Well, right, but okay, so to bring that back to threat assessment, though, if you're not paying attention, you can't be evaluating the threat at the table properly.
Yep.
You need to be watching to a degree, and I've pulled my phone out plenty of times in games because someone's taken a 9-minute turn doing something, and or whatever. Or my Chris, what's this dude's name?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but right, you need to be aware that like every time you're on your phone, you're missing game information and your threat evaluation is suffering as a result. How about you, Max? Mistakes that you make.
I screw up Council's judgment
All
every
right,
week.
that's true, yeah.
He does. It's so amazing.
He did it like 3 weeks in a row. That was pretty spectacular.
That's why I said it, so neither of you got to.
That one week that he cast it, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna name this," and the other player's like, "I'm gonna name some of yours," and he's like, "Well," and then some of mine got named. I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna name some of Max's too," so he loses 2 things.
Yep, totally botched that. Again, late at night.
I'll get rid of one of my things for 2 of yours and the spell that you cast. That's great.
This kind of ties into Chris's example of like looking ahead to see what's going to happen potentially. But I think one thing I tend to see people do is they evaluate the board state and the threat situation based on something really superficial. So, for example, oh, that guy's got 7 elves out. But they're all 1/1s or 1/2s, and like there's one lord out, so okay, he can swing in and do 12 points of damage, maybe because there's no trample, and he's got 1 card in hand. Well, maybe that's an overrun or a crater hoof, maybe, but the odds are pretty high it isn't. Conversely, that guy who has a Kiki Jiki sitting there and 7 cards in hand has a really good chance of having a combo piece that he's just going to win the game.
Yep.
So even though his board state looks way weaker because he's got a Kiki Jiki sitting there and nothing else going on, and the green player's got all the creatures in the world in his field, based on all the information, if you're not being superficial about it, if you're really taking it all in and doing the evaluation, that guy with the Kiki Jiki out is way scarier than the person with the 7 elves.
Kiki Jiki is just scary in general.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Kiki Jiki should be a card that you're worried about immediately.
Yep.
Unlike Sheila Dread, where you can be like, it's not going to affect me right now, and I can maybe wait it out. Kiki Jiki, you probably can't wait it out. Any more mistakes you guys want to mention?
I don't ever make mistakes. I'm a perfect player.
I'm trying to think. Well, here's
The look on Max's face is priceless.
there's a lot of overlap between like threat assessment mistakes and play mistakes.
Right.
Yes, it's hard to do, separate the two of them too.
Yeah.
Because you can screw up doing something compared to not knowing what the threat was, type of deal.
So do you ever? I'm not sure if misassess the threat is the right way to phrase it, but like, do you maybe screw up your attack patterns if you're playing against like a friend or certain people, that kind of thing? Like, because I definitely feel like there's some people that don't attack me maybe as consistently as I should because we're having a good conversation or we're getting along well, and I'm like, oh man, I feel like you should have hit me right there, and you didn't. You hit that person. Do you ever notice that at all that happens in games?
I've done that before.
I've noticed it. I've done it as well, where I just kind of filter off of one player onto another player.
I mean, there's been times in the opposite history, there's been times when I haven't swung at Max because I've been like, I've hit him the last 2 games, and I know you're the threat, but you've been the threat the last 2 games too, so I'm like, I don't know if I want to hit him again. So that is one thing I probably do. I let that kind of thing skew my threat assessment as well, because I'm like, well, I think I've been picking on him, so I'm not going to do it this time. But I'm picking on him because he's in the position to get picked on. Like, he's a person you should be picking on.
I try to also split up my attacks, which you should never do.
If you're
always just attack one person.
If you're playing optimally to win,
Yep.
you just burn that one person down usually. Like, not always, but
Yep.
like that's usually the optimal move. And I also tend to not do that, particularly the first 3 or 4 or 5 turns of the game. Now, like once you get the game going and you get a feel for who's the scariest, I change that up. But early on, I also tend to rotate around the clock.
Yeah. I mean, we'll use a World of Warcraft analogy. If you attack like multiple people at once, your threat level is much lower than if you just single out one person.
So you make yourself less of a target then too as well. No, that makes sense. Yeah, because then you're drawing less threat from other people, less aggro by being the person that's just queued on them.
Yep.
So do you guys make threat assessments based on, I'm assuming you do this, but when you have to make choices at the end of the game, I'm down to killing 2 people, and it's my turn, and I can kill one of you too. What kind of things do you think about when you make that decision?
Who's prettier?
That's it. So Max usually gets killed. Really well.
Yes. I'm pretty.
No, I look at it as how the game has gone. Especially like it also depends on how you like the deck that you're playing. Like whose deck is going to be more of a threat to you once it becomes one on one compared to
sure.
3 on three
like
on
I mentioned
3.
with Angus McKenzie. If you get down to 1v1 with Angus, you're probably going to get locked out.
I think it also has a lot to do with where I am in that state of the game with my deck. Like, yeah, I can kill either one of you guys, but have I used all my board wipes? Have I used majority of my targeted removal? And if Chris has pretty much kind of an empty board except for a few creatures on the ground, and I know I've used X amount of resources out of my deck with no way to get them back, I'm probably going to let him live and take out Dana, who probably has all these things I wish I could remove because I can, and I have less to deal with Chris versus dealing with Dana.
I've done that math with that, like to what things that you can remove. That's the math I've done before. I'm like, I'm down to 1 of 2 players, and that player's got a Sylvan Library out and a Phyrexian Arena out, and that person over there is drawing cards off of their Mentor the Meek and something else. I have no way in my black-red deck or black-blue deck to deal with that Phyrexian Arena and Sylvan Library, and if it's down to me and that person 1v1ing for the next 6 turns...
Oh, they're going to out-card advantage
They're going to out-card advantage because I have no cards in my deck probably, maybe 1 that can deal with that answer, whereas looking across the table at the other person who's got a creature out and they're drawing off an artifact or something, well, I can deal with those things. I've got, whether I'm in Rakdos, I can blow up the artifact, or I always have creature removal in those 2 colors as well.
Yep.
I can solve their problem if it goes to 1v1. So that's what I think an important one to look at the end of the game is, can you potentially ever deal with that person? Because sometimes you can't. I remember thinking that in against the Lord Windgrace deck fairly recently. I don't know if that deck has Constant Mists in it, but if he has Constant Mists,
it really should.
It probably should, right? It should. But at the time, I didn't. I don't know if that person does. But if they have Constant Mists and I don't kill them right now, then the game's over because they're just going to lock me out with Constant Mists. So I'm just going to kill the Windgrace player right now because I can't take the chance. Whereas I can't remember who the other player was, but I'm like, oh, I doubt anything they're going to do in that deck is going to lock me out of the game. So it's not going to Angus me or it's not going to Constant Miss me. So I'll let that person live and I'll kill the person who potentially has the ability to make the game unwinnable.
Agreed.
Any final thoughts on assessing the threat?
Try your best just to do it right. I mean, I guess it's all situational in your games and whatnot, but
I think it's the kind of thing that every time you play a game, be conscious of it. And I think if you're being conscious of it or trying to learn something, I think if you walk away from a game and be like, okay, what did I do wrong there? Or what could I have done right? If you ask yourself that question, I'm not saying like sit down for 20 minutes and pour over a replay of the game, but just in your head for 2 minutes, be like, how could I have won that game?
You don't keep a dream journal of all your games and where you screwed up?
No, but you know what? If I'm like, honestly, when I drive home after EDH night for my 10-minute drive home and then the 10 minutes I'm lying in bed before I fall asleep, I'm usually thinking about games and thinking about like first of all, what cards could I swap out to deal with these problems and is it worth swapping them out? And number 2, what could I have done differently? I mean, I do that. I absolutely do that.
Same here.
I know in big tournaments I've been to, I've actually come across as a dick to people because I don't shake their hand right away because I'm too busy going over the game in my head.
Yeah.
Like what I did wrong. And also I'm like, oh, hey, I'm sorry. I wasn't even paying attention. And then shake their hand and then go back to my little world.
Go back to brooding over it.
Yeah. It's not like I'm mad at the player or anything. It's
right.
just like, what did I do wrong? Could I have done something different? A thing that I would bring up is with threat assessment, don't be afraid to ask.
Sure. What did I do wrong there?
Or ask the table, like, what is the threat going on here? Like, what am I missing? You know, what are we worried about going on right here? And if all the people unanimously point at one person, that's probably who you got to worry about.
Right.
And if that one person even agrees, like, yeah, this is probably the best target. There you go.
And sometimes someone will just say, "Oh, I got that dealt with. Don't worry about that."
Yep.
Like, oh, well, I didn't think that was going to be the case. Thought they were the big problem. Well, you know what? That means you're the big problem. But sometimes that happens too. That doesn't. There's no harm in asking. The worst people can say is say nothing, and then that's fine too. You've learned nothing, but
that's true. I mean, but it doesn't hurt to ask, especially as a newer player. Don't be afraid to ask. A lot of senior players that you're going to be playing with, they'll help you out.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't, then probably not the play group you want to be with.
And I absolutely will. Like, I don't, we always joke about like giving away our secrets in the show, but like I will give away my secrets if somebody asks me them. I will absolutely give them away. I don't mind doing that.
I will rip your tongue out.
Well, it's like a great instance is your Glissa deck. When you put down the bite staff thorn bite staff, and then the other one,
the machine gun,
and they're just like, oh, okay, yep, and there he's got to equip that. And I'm like, oh no, you don't even see what's about to happen.
But once someone realizes that, and if you tell them ahead of time, like, you need to remove that right now, because if that gets equipped, every creature on the board is dead, and he's bringing back 9 artifacts from his graveyard.
And they don't ever see it, and they're just like, oh, really? What? And it's like, all of a sudden, like, bam, 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 bam. I'm like, see, I tried telling you.
Well, another girl in the deck is Nemesis Mask. Nemesis Mask comes out, and I've had a lot of people like, what is that card? Because number one, what is that card? No one's playing Nemesis Mask. They read it, and I'm like, oh, so it's like a lure equipment? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, all right. Like, you don't. My commander has first strike and death touch. Your board's gonna die.
Yep.
But okay. But if someone else there is, if you ask the table, why is he playing that garbage card that I've never heard of before? They'll probably, if there's someone who's played the deck before, they will point that out to you.
Yep.
Or maybe he'll just point out, or people will just point out. Max sometimes points out anyway. Just goes, that needs to be removed because someone's board's going to be killed next turn, and he's going to bring back 4 artifacts. So for our sign out question, this is the one I'm going to put on Twitter this week to ask for people's opinions. What specific card in EDH do you think is a bigger threat than most people realize? So there's a, Cyclonic Rift wouldn't be a good answer because everyone thinks Rift is scary, but like, what card do you think people don't realize how good it is when it comes down? Not everybody, obviously some people get it, but like, what one do you think is most often underestimated in Commander?
I have so many of them again. I couldn't choose just one.
You can go first because I make sure I have this card right.
Okay. The very first thing I have on here is any type of sack outlet card. I talked about this earlier, and people they underestimate that stuff.
Something bad is going to happen with a sack outlet.
Yes.
The best case scenario, for the most part, with a sack outlet is my Tesa deck, where I'm just like sacking a Resummoning Skeleton to make tokens, and I'm going to do it 7 times a turn and make 7 spirits that I can do stuff with.
That's still not a good outcome.
That's awful. That's awful if you're going against it, and that's the best case scenario most of the time.
Yes.
I agree. Sack outlets are there for a reason. That's okay. Good. I like that one. Max.
One of mine. So I'm going to say cards that break the rules of the game. So the example I have is Sigarda's Aid.
Okay.
So it allows you to play aura and equipment as though they had flash. But what really I like about this card is that whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you can equip it to something for free.
And that seems like, that's just convenient. They save some mana. They can play at any time. It's much scarier than that.
Right. That could literally be the difference of only casting 1 sword of X and Y versus 2 swords of X and Y in a turn.
And casting them after you've been forced to make a decision to block or not.
Right. So cards like that, because, I'm toying around with a Voltron equipment deck in my mind, but like right there, like, cool, I don't have to pay any equip costs if that thing sticks around.
I just did an article on EDH Rec about Vidal Canori, but Vidal Canori changes the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you like it or dislike it or think it's overrated or underrated, you should be absolutely aware that cards that alter the traditional rules of the game are probably pretty strong, and pay attention to that.
Although I love casting Quicken just to draw a card. Just to mess with people, just to draw a card.
In my Talrand deck, that's what I do with it half the time.
There's one of those good blue draw spells we were talking about.
In my Talrand deck, it's 1 mana to make a 2/2 flying Drake and draw me a card. That's great.
The worst comes to worst, you get to cast something that you shouldn't be casting at this point in time.
I was thinking of a specific card, and it's a card we've mentioned before as being underrated in general, but I've seen plenty of times someone drops in a Outpost Siege, and then first of all, someone at the table goes, "Oh, what mode are you choosing?"
What?
So that right there tells me you don't understand how strong that card is if you think they're choosing anything but the extra draw spell in red. So
There's 2 modes on that card.
I have
Right.
contemplated choosing the other one. Was
I
it
mean, yeah,
whenever a
once-
creature enters, you deal 2 damage to a fly or something? I think is what
Yeah.
it is. But
And-
I've contemplated
And
it.
maybe in like a dragon deck, once in a while, you're like, oh, because you're playing a 5 color and you've got a bunch of other draw spells or whatever, maybe you don't care. But like 99% of the time, you're choosing. I didn't know what mode it is that draws you the cards. Like cons, I think.
Yeah.
Cons
gets you
is the impulse draw. Then dragons says whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield,
Leaves the battlefield.
Yeah.
it deals 1 damage to target creature or player.
But like the last time I got out of my Lathwas deck, I played it, and the next turn I came around, I got a card off, and I'm like, okay, I got 1 card ahead. If someone destroys it, that'll be fine. But people kept not destroying it, and I kept looking around, not saying anything, going, people don't realize in mono red how strong me getting a single extra card every turn is. And they're just letting it happen all the time. And it's even better, not that Phyrexian Arena isn't really good, when you get out at the right time too. It is. But you're also in black, where if someone blows up your Phyrexian Arena, odds are you've got 7 more draw spells in that deck at least to get you cards. That's not the case in red. When you blow up my Outpost Siege, I may still have Faithless Looting or whatever else in
My
there.
experimental frenzy.
Right, but that
Right.
doesn't get you. And Frenzy will get you ahead. But like aside from a Frenzy, which just came out for the most part, when you hit Outpost Siege, that's the way red gets ahead in cards. There's like not a lot of ways to actually gain card advantage. So that's one I think people tend to let sit that you shouldn't. Number 1, it's really good. Number 2, in the color it's in, it's that much more valuable. All right, those are good answers from everyone. I'll put that on Twitter and see what people in the Twitterverse think for cards that are often seen as threats that are way stronger than people realize. I think that is it we have this week. We'll be back next week. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.